All right, we're going to start working on Chapter 7 today. Yay, we're making some good progress into the book. And this chapter is kind of an interesting one. And in fact, with any luck, we're going to get through Chapter 7 and 8 today. That's kind of my goal, so we can kind of get ourselves back on track. These are kind of shorter chapters compared to some of the other ones, but there's some really important concepts inside both of them that you guys need to know. So here's a really quick overview of the learning objectives here. Some of this stuff we have talked about a little bit, but notice like the first topic here is a thing we were talking about just before we started recording this video, which is relative hyperlinks to web pages and also relative links to content within your site structures. How to work with hyperlinks to internal links. We've done a little bit of that. CSS sprites, talking about 3-column layouts. CSS for printing, that's kind of interesting. Looking at mobile design best practices. Setting up web pages for mobile display. I talk about a new meta tag for you. And then working with different responsive techniques and 2 new open source techniques that are out there. And you know, I'm going to say they're not that new. Flexbox has been around for a while, but that's one that a lot of people have been using. And then this new thing called the CSS grid layout, which is very similar to the type of thing we do with Bootstrap, if you've ever heard of that technology. But that's one that is an open standard that WC3 has been pushing. And I don't force you to do a lot of coding in those formats, but you should be aware of them. And from one web designer to another, what I recommend is both Flexbox and CSS Grid. We don't really go in depth in that here, but as you like explore how to do this stuff, these are exploration paths that I would strongly suggest that you walk because they really help with responsive layout, especially for coding by hand. All right, so let's start with the first major topic here. And this one is a little perplexing for people initially. First of all, they talk about relative linking on a website, and here is why. When you're working with a folder structure on your own machine, and if your URLs are looking like you're attaching to your own file system, I'm going to try to give you guys an example here in just a moment. But I know a couple of you had turned in assignments where instead of, you know, in an href, it would just say the name of the file. It would be like, you know, c:\users/John/document/web/unit1/fishcreek/index.html, right? And it's all that's in there, right? First of all, that is not a relative file link. That is a direct, precise link to something on your computer system. When I pick up that file and move it over to Apollo, guess what happens? Breaks. Because that, first of all, it doesn't have a C drive on Apollo. That's not how Linux systems work. And you don't have your own document folder and with your username. That's not how it works at all, right? So what you have to have is what you call relative links, meaning links to stuff within your folder structure. And there's a syntax for it that initially can feel a little confusing. All right, so let's talk about that bit by bit. If you happen to have everything in the same folder, so here's the example. If your contact file, let's say right now we're on the home page, index.html, and maybe what would be smart on my part is to actually take my file folder and go to my Web 1 resources here and show you where I've been doing my work, which is in this folder, right? And we're moving into a new unit today, so I am going to create a new one, but I'm going to use this old one as the example. So here's my index file, and if I want to connect to my contact file, they're in the same folder on the same level. In order to connect those 2 files together, I just have to say what the name of the file is. They're in the same folder already. It doesn't have to go looking anywhere. It just says, hey, in this folder, find this file. So relative to index.html, contact.html is in the same folder. So if I'm calling it, I use that syntax. And since I already have done that in my stuff, you'll see I just call it directly, right? Simple enough. If the file happens to be inside of a subfolder, so if I have a folder inside my folder that I'm working in, then I also have to preface it with the name of the folder and a /. All right? So here's the example that they're using. In this folder, the folder that holds the whole project, they have index and contact. So when I wanted to reach contact, those two are in the same folder, so they see each other. I just say contact. But if I want to get to the Canyon file, the Canyon file is in the rooms folder, and it sits there. So in order to get to the rooms folder first, I have to say rooms / and then the name of the file. Here's where the tricky part comes in. What if I happen to be on the Canyon page and want to go back to the index page? It sits one folder level up. So the syntax to get there is this. You go .. /. The .. means go up one level and then go to the file. So I'm already inside this folder, but I can't get to index directly. I have to go up one level, .. and then find the file. So that's what this syntax is. If I happen to be 2 layers deep, so if I'm on the Canyon page here, and I want to get to this page down here, weekend, first I got to go up, and then I got to go in. So I go up, and then I go in. See the syntax? And then you get to the file. Now most people, when they're creating simple websites, like the ones that we're building so far, 5, 10, 20 pages, and you put it all in the root of the folder, not a big deal. But if you've done work like I've done in the past, where I've created websites where it's like, oh my God, I got like 1,000 pages, and I can't put them all in the root because it's impossible to find anything, so I start putting them into categories because it just makes more sense. Or, I have image folders, but even the images, there's like hundreds of images, so I can't put them all in the root folder, so I put like, images of, children, images of, product, images of whatever, and I separate the folders. You get into this situation where you have to know how to navigate to it. A good editor will help you do that. And you see, like I've been using Dreamweaver, or if you use like brackets or Visual Studio Code, they will kind of help you find the file automatically as you type. But otherwise, you have to be aware of where it's located by actually looking at your folder and figuring out where stuff is. So the only subfolder I have right now is images, right? So whenever I was linking up an image in my work, and I don't know if there's any on this page, but let's say this is the About page. I forget which page has images on it. All right, like right here. Whenever I needed to go to an image, first I go to the image folder and then to the image. Once again, if this has more than that in it, like particularly if it says file : and it has your whole Windows path in there, not good, folks. It's not going to work on Apollo. Also, not really strongly encouraged is if it has this in it, HTTP, Apollo, etc., etc. That indicates that'll work, not that it won't work, right? The problem is that I can't pick the project up necessarily and move it anywhere because it's still attaching back to Apollo. If you set up your website correctly with relative file linking, you can pick it up and put it on any computer and see your stuff. That's the goal. So you don't want to create a website that only works on one machine. You want to be able to pick it up and move it anywhere and have it work. Most notably a web server that the world can see. So relative linking is the way that you make that happen. All right. There will be times, and I get this question, where sometimes the only way to make something work is to put it in an absolute file path on a specific machine. So for example, if there's maybe an image that you're pulling into your website that's not in your folder structure, now that's considered really bad etiquette, by the way, right? to link to somebody else's image and pull it into your website, but you can do it. The only time I really recommend that you do it is if you're pulling it in from your own stuff, not really from somebody else's. Some people get mad if you're using an image on their website and you're linking to it. And then your website gets popular, and every time somebody goes to your website, you're pulling in their image. People get pissed. They get very angry. And you know what? It's a form of plagiarism, too. Yeah, so just beware. I'm just telling you, okay? All right, let's talk about this. And I know that back in the early days of this class, we already did this, right? The back to top thing. And I had told you that the way that you make these in-page anchor work is you have an ID that matches up with the anchor. So notice the syntax for this. If you want to link to any part of a page, you just simply put in a £sign and the name of the ID you're attaching to. Top happens to be one of those that works automatically. You don't have to actually create a div at the top that says top. It will automatically work. And we did that. I don't know if you guys remember, but I can prove it to you, right? Right, I think on the index page, right here, you did it back to top. But let's say you've got a page of content that's really, really long. So you got like 20 paragraphs of stuff in like 10 different sections. You can create an in-page anchor. So I could, for example, put an ID here and call it, I don't know, whatever. Did I already use that one? Yeah, probably did. Let's call it right here. All right, right here. All right. And I want to link to that one. I could come down here and I could just copy this whole thing, paste it back in, and then right here I would type right here. Back to right here. This is being kind of silly, and the problem with this is that list is right above where my link is, but I'm still going to show you how it operates. So let's just go ahead and bring that up in the browser really quick. So here it is, right? Back to right here. Now it doesn't seem like it's doing anything. Yeah, but if this was at the top of the screen, maybe here, let me move it. Let me move the ID out of here. Let's put it somewhere towards the top. Let's put it somewhere where it'll actually move. How about this paragraph right here? Okay. So I'm putting that ID on my paragraph. Save it. Let's do a refresh here. Refresh. And I'm going to click right here. And then it jumps up to right where I have that. So that gets put at the top of the screen. And then notice the link.
So is it that top works automatically, or is it that when you don't have an ID, it just automatically goes to the top? Like if you don't have an ID for anything at all, and just specify?
No, top, for whatever reason, top is one that automatically works in it.
What if you wrote something else and we didn't create an ID? Wouldn't that still go to the top?
Yeah, that would.
Yeah, then we would say it's not top specifically.
It's not.
Anything, just anything without.
Yeah, you know, Joe, it's a pretty astute observation. So what he's trying to point out is, I didn't put in an ID for top, but it takes me to the top. But I could put in an ID for top and put it somewhere else. Yeah. But top, for some reason, automatically works. That's usually the first one we show people. So I think it's interesting that the author shows that normally you do an ID like this. Usually if you're going to use in-page anchors, it's because you have so much content on a page that maybe like 5 pages worth and you would scroll. So you might have a little quick list at the top or a quick list at the bottom so you can jump specifically to a section of a page rather than having to scroll to it. And some websites are built like that, so like when you actually hit a menu button at the top, you're not really even going to a different page, you're just jumping to a different part of the same page. And I don't know if you guys have seen any sites like that, but there's many of them out there these days. All right, let's talk about another interesting technique. Whenever I post videos in Blackboard, I always make sure that the links that I put on your course shells don't open up inside the same window. Did you guys ever notice that? So when you click one of my links, it opens up a new browser tab. Well, you can actually do that by adding this to any of your links. See where it says target equals underscore blank. Let's give that a try. So right here, I've got a link, and I'm going to move it down to the next line so you can see it more clearly, where we're going to the USA Network's Mr. Robot homepage, right? And I'm going to add here target equals underscore blank. Now, I haven't saved this yet. Notice how the tab is red? So for right now, I'm going to go back to my page and click that link, and what it's currently doing inside the same tab replaces my page and then takes me to that page, right? The problem with that is if you're trying to keep people on your website, like if you're trying to sell them something, for example, they just left your website, right? Right. So what a lot of sites will do, now I'm going to go back, I'm going to hit the save. So now it saves, because it turned blue, right? Back over here, I'm going to refresh so it loads it. Now when I click the link, watch what happens up at the top where the tabs are. It opens a new browser tab.
So you want that pretty much?
That's a preference. Internally to my site, I don't want that. If I'm going to flip from page to page, right, I want it in the same tab most of the time. If I'm going to an external site, I think it's helpful to open up a separate tab. And I don't know if you guys are watching this, but it's been pretty spectacular.
Well, people argue politically, I mean, to feel that adding links to like your social media, for example, is bad UX.
Yeah, I tend to kind of be of that mindset too. It's like if you're on a website, you're trying to keep somebody there, particularly if you're trying to sell them something or teach them something or whatever. Whenever you're shuffling them off somewhere else, you have the possibility of losing them because now they're somewhere else. They're somewhere else, you know, in the multiverse or whatever, like going down a different pathway. Okay. But sometimes, you know, it's necessary. So like in our course shells, when I give you article links, I prefer they open up in different windows so that, okay, well, you got your course shell still here, and then you can come back to it. So it's just kind of a way for you guys to kind of orchestrate where your users are going. In the old days when we would run this command, the target blank, it would actually open up a new window. But when tabs came around, then they started, well, do we really need a new window? Can't we just put it on a new tab? You know, and so that's what it does these days. If your browser is set to its default, it should open up a new tab. If it's not, it will open up a new window. There are a few other settings that go with a target thing, and they include target self. So guess what that does? What it does by default, puts it back in the same window. Or target parent, and that would take you back to the page that originally, or to the window that originally propagated it, which once again is the same as self, which is one of the reasons why we don't use it. But when we were doing new windows, so if you were in a new window and you said target parent, it would take you back to the other window. People really don't use those very much, so the reason the author is just showing this one is because this is the only one of like functional use. Yes, John?
The target equals blank code creates another tab. It's not, and on the other hand, it's optional. Don't have to do it, but if you do, there's a chance. Like,
well, yeah, what you have to do is be selective in how you're using it. So here, they're taking you to an external website. I think in that circumstance, it's good, right? If you're linking back to your own site, it might be silly to do that. It really just kind of depends. You have to figure out what makes the most sense. Yeah, and you know, some of it is kind of subjective, all right? Right. Let's take a look at this technique. So far we've learned when we use links that we usually either wrap it around text or an image, right? You guys have seen both. So inside your href tag, so if I look at my code, I can just put text, right? Do I have any that link an image? Oh, right here. So my logo, right here, up at the top of my page, is wrapped around an image. So when I click the image on my Mr. Robot page, so if I'm on, it looks like I need to relaunch it again. So if I'm on my home page and I go to my gallery page, or okay, my code example page, and I want to go back to home, this is a link back to home, right? So I can either create text that is a link or an image that is a link. One technique that I've been seeing a lot more lately, and I can think of one site that I go to on a daily basis where they do this, is well, it's the BBC News site, right? So check out this site once it loads up. If you're interested in checking out one of their articles, right, you can intuitively go right to the title of the article, right, and see how the link highlights, right? But notice as I move off of it, I can also go to the image. But you see what happens when I'm hovering over the image? The link is highlighting too. In fact, if I go to the text, so really all of this is a link to the article. It's one link. And that's exactly what the author is showing you right here. That in some cases it makes sense to wrap that link tag around a few different things because they really kind of all should take you to the same place. So that's what the BBC News website is doing. The image is a link, the title is a link, and the text is all a link. And how do you do that? You just wrap the anchor tag all the way around all that stuff. And it all behaves as one link. Cool, right? Yeah, I think that's kind of neat. Is it always appropriate? Probably not. You know, once again, very subjective as to how you should apply it. I think on the BBC website, it's pretty intuitive. Because if you think about this, right, we're looking at it on the screen, and I have a mouse and I can get really particular with where I point. But if I'm sitting there on my phone, right, so this is like one of those mobile considerations, that's tablet view, and then we get down to phone view. I'm like, hey, I want to read this article, right? Where are you going to click? Well, who knows, right? That finger's pretty fat, and you know, you're driving in a car and you're bouncing, whatever. Your friend's pushing you at the same time, or your kid knocked it out of your hand, whatever. Anywhere I put my finger, the picture, the text, anywhere in that range, boom, I'm there. So people that are doing this are doing it a lot because they're trying to consider for mobile. We want people to read the article. Does it really matter? You clicked on the text, you don't get to go there. See how silly that sounds, right? You want them to read it, so give them a lot of ways to get there. Now, of course, you know, the BBC is like one of those, it's like a national, it's a lot different than what we have in the US, right? The BBC is kind of like the big commercial TV thing in England, but it's also like public television. It's like PBS, but on steroids. And so they kind of give away their content, but they still have ads, right? So if you're not getting to the article, you're not seeing their ads and all the other stuff in the sidebars. All right, so that's a technique that they use. So I think that's a great like living example of how that works. All right. Early on, we also learned how to do a mail to link. Remember that? And we put it in the footer, at least I did, and we talked about like the pros and cons of it. And they also have, and these are really fascinating. Once again, I think these are more mobile usable than desktop usable, but notice they have ones where you can put in a phone number, right? And if you preface it with TEL and a colon, person's on their phone, and they click that link, guess what happens? It fires up their dialer, you know, whatever dialer app they have. That can be cool too, right? So like, hey, give us a call. Okay, click, and your dialer kicks in. Or if you want to text message them, it's SMS. Now, if you create a mobile website, I think these are hugely useful. And I would do that, like if I was, like for example, and I used to do a lot of like restaurant websites, right? I thought these were brilliant, right? Because you put it right up at the top, you know, call Joe's Pizza. You can click the number on your phone and you're calling them, right? You didn't have to hunt around, you know, it just worked, right? And that's why you throw these in. I don't think I need to demonstrate these. I think you guys kind of get it conceptually. But if, depending on the kind of site that you're building, like if you're trying to pull customers in and you want to interact with them, totally do this. In fact, if you're going to tell people, like you're building a website for a business, why do people look up a business on the phone? It's like, where are you and are you open, right? So I always tell people the top of your website should say, Joe's Pizza, call 262 whatever, click here for directions. You know, don't make them guess. Put your hours up right up at the top, your address right up at the top. All that stuff should be really, really easy to get to. Because why else are they looking you up? It's pretty sad if they rely on Google more than your own website to get them to your business. And you know what? I mean, that's kind of my approach. I know how I'll look a place up and it'll either say website or call, right? But if your website, like if they look up Joe's Pizza and end up on your site, you don't want to limit them from being able to connect up with you because you want to sell them stuff, right? You want to succeed at whatever you're doing, so make it easy. Don't make them guess. Here's another revisit of a really quick concept. This concept of what we call CSS sprites. Now, I'm not a huge fan of using this. I think it's a little bit of an antiquated technique, but some people still do, so I think it's important to talk about it. But the concept is this. When you put in an image for something, sometimes you want to have an alternate image that pops up when you're interacting with it. So the example that they're giving here is if you build the Lighthouse Island Bistro site, that you might go over to the menu here, and when you hover, notice it goes from like that light shade to a dark shade. And instead of having two separate images, what they do is they use CSS sprites, and then they basically adjust the position of the image that they're showing. And I'm not a huge fan of this technique, but people do use it. Some people create entire CSS sprite sheets where they have hundreds of little images all on one image, so they're only loading one image on the website, and then they're selecting which of those images is popping up. Again, I'm not a huge fan, but you should be aware that it exists, all right? You want to explore it, go for it. I think it's antiquated. That's just an opinion, okay? So you don't have to buy into my opinion. All right. In the last chapter, we looked at a few different layouts. And I did tell you that as we kind of progress through the chapters, what the author is going to start to do is show you other types of layouts, sometimes a little bit more complicated than the ones that you've learned, and we'll show you examples of what those look like in a layout. So what they're showing here is a 3-column layout. So they have a header, the nav's on the left, they have a content area in the middle with a footer, and then a right sidebar or an aside with little news blurbs. Right, so they show you that structurally, what that looks like. Then they take you here, and then they show you what you would use for each one of the sections, at least in principle, how you get it to look like that by using floats and widths and whatever. And these are techniques that you can apply to any of your projects. So if you have the code for header, nav, main, footer, aside, news, and news, right? And you see that footer sits inside of main, and that news sits inside of aside, so it would have to be that way in your code too. Then you can apply these CSS techniques to get the stuff to show up just like it is in that 3-column layout. So what the author is doing is she's giving you a view to how to get different looks. Like maybe you want to go for a look like this, and this is how you accomplish it. So really kind of taking a little bit of the guesswork out of like how you might achieve that. Another consideration that we have, and this is kind of weird, right, is when we do style sheets, we can actually designate what the style sheet is for. Now, this is kind of weird, right? Because, well, it's for, you know, the computer, right? Not necessarily. This is interesting. So notice that they have two different style sheets designated here. And this is not unusual, folks. Usually when we design a style sheet, we're designing it for the screen, right? A mobile screen or a computer screen. But you can also design a style sheet for print. Weird. All right, so here's some considerations. And I used to do this. I had a couple of sites that I built that were kind of e-commerce sites, and people would come and they'd look at these products on the screen. And as you're looking at it on the screen, you know, I got the header at the top and my menus and my footers and these little sidebars and all the products in the middle. And they would scroll through and look at the products, and then there's like an add to cart and calculate shipping and all those kind of weird things that you would get in a shopping cart. And then, you know, I was discovering, because I can look at like my web server logs, that some people were printing the pages. I'm like, huh. So they're kind of like, so instead of having a printed catalog, they're just going to the website and they're hitting print. But every time they hit print, it pulls all the stuff in with it. And it doesn't always look good, right? If you've ever tried to print a web page, sometimes it, you know, doesn't really carry so well. But smart designers know, like if certain people, they look at their server logs and say, hey, people are always printing this one catalog page. So then you can actually go into that page and set up a separate style sheet for a printed view. And here's some things that you might want to do to make that happen. So look at this next page. So one thing that you can do, remember we learned display none? You might say, do I really need to print the navigation on the print version? I can put nav display none and it disappears. And yes, the browser knows when you're hitting print and it uses the print style sheet. Why? Because you said right here, media, print. So when you hit the print button, it pulls up the print style sheet. It gets rid of the navigation. Instead of using pixels for fonts, you use points like you do in like a Word document. So you go into a Word document and like the standard is a 12-point font, if you guys didn't know. Some people use 10, but usually 10 to 12 point is pretty normal to make it readable. I always say a little bigger is usually better for most people. And then also use high contrast, so a dark text color, because you're printing on paper, right? You don't want to print like gray or yellow, because if they have like black and white, it's not going to look good. You can also put in page breaks. So if you know that after the 5th product, the 6th one will be cut off halfway between, you can manually put in a page break to force it to go to the next page, just like you would in a Word document. Also, you might be able to, notice that it says print URLs for hyperlinks. And this is really a fascinating, this is a pretty advanced CSS technique. But if you're curious, you can actually take the URL that something is, in other words, a URL that you're trying to get somebody to link to, and get that to actually print on the screen. So if they actually want to go to that site independently, they can. So I know, Brenda, you're giving me a look, right? Because you're thinking about this. So here's the what if. If you create a link and it just says, go to the Mr. Robot homepage, that's not the URL on the screen. This would allow you to pull the URL out of that and print it on the screen. And this is a really fascinating technique, because this piece of CSS that you're seeing there, this actually generates content on the page. So it's reading the URL and then printing it to the screen. It's a pretty advanced technique. Here's a simple example of it. You don't have to employ this on any of your projects, but I just think it's cool to know. When you guys get to the Web 2 class, they talk more about these higher end CSS functions. So we'll save the fireworks for then. All right. Let's talk about mobile devices and some of the issues with them. All right. We all get these like really fancy smartphones, you know, and is there anybody in here that does not carry one with them? I'm just really, Cordy, brave man. Is it because your parents won't buy you one?
I can't handle being on it. Pretty much it consumes my life, so I'm like, I'm just not going to deal with it.
Interesting, interesting. Interesting for a young person to say that, actually, right? I mean, I'll tell you what, I try not to be on it all the time, you know, because I'm like, if I'm working and I'm getting like phone calls, like I was getting a phone call before, I have no idea what it is, but you know, I'm in the middle of class, sorry, I'm not answering, right? And it can be a little distracting. All right, but when we buy these things, not only do we get the devices, right, but you also buy into a service plan, right? And then you get usually a data plan to go with it, right? And depending on your provider, you get different qualities of data plans, different qualities of devices. And, you know, this is just kind of an informal poll. How many of you are Verizon? US Cellular, T-Mobile, Sprint, burner phone,
Yeah, I do have a burner phone.
AT&T, whatever.
An actual
All right.
burner phone.
All right. Now, depending on which service you use, I know that some of those services are horrible here in downtown Racine, and I know some of them rock. And I know that US Cellular rocks down here because that's what I have. I am blown away at the download speeds I get in downtown Racine. The reason I went with them, honestly, is because when I go up north, it actually works at the cottage. And very few services do. And if you do, you have to like be outside and like rotate and I'm losing you, you know, that kind of thing. But US Cellular actually works up there, which is one of the reasons I have it. But here's the issue. Regardless of the kind of service you get, and these days when you're getting a smartphone, typically you're getting 4G service. I mean, I don't think it's even an option anymore, right? And we're on the cusp of 5G. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with what those mean, but basically, it's the type of signal and the kind of bandwidth that you get. It's the kind of quality of the network connection that you have. And we like to think that because you're paying for a certain level of service, that you're going to get that level of service. Like I remember when the 4G commercials first came out, and they have like a guy sitting in the car with his friends, like they're downloading pictures, and all the friends got the pictures right away, and he's like, I'm still waiting, because he was on 3G, you know. But they had it in like 2 seconds. But you guys know the reality, right? Sometimes when, regardless of your provider, you're just in a zone where you don't have really good service, and you're down to 3G or, oh my God, 1X, right? You're down to analog signal, which is like dial-up speeds. So one mistake that mobile designers make for web applications is we make this assumption that mobile users have high bandwidth like desktop users have at home. Not the case, folks. You have to be considerate of low bandwidth connections and design your sites so that you can operate on low bandwidth efficiently. So small graphics, not too much content. Don't make them download like 20 high resolution images to their phone that are irrelevant for a phone because you can't really see them that big. All right. So we got small screen size, low bandwidth. The font palettes aren't quite the same on phones either. You don't have all the fonts that you have available on a PC or a Mac. Sometimes, and I'd say the color thing, it really isn't an issue anymore, but in the old days it was, you'd have really bad resolution screens. They wouldn't have full color support, and they wouldn't have high resolution. Some of our modern devices, and like the one I'm holding in my hand, this is an S8, it's considered dated, but it's got really high resolution display, and I can push it up to even higher levels if I want. But even if you buy a really high-end device, a lot of times they have them like throttled back a little bit because it burns through battery, right? Not everybody needs to watch 4K videos on their phone, like they can really even tell the difference. You know, that's the kind of thing. Sometimes the controls are a little awkward, so you have to, like, if you were working on a screen and you think like, well, that menu button is plenty big, and you move it to a phone and you go, oh my God, I can't even get my finger on it, right? You guys, yeah, and then they're like zooming in to hit a link, right? You got to think about that when you're designing for mobile, all right? Flash support, well, flash support's kind of going away altogether, but phones do not have the processing capability or the memory capabilities of regular desktop machines either. The problem a lot of web designers make is they're working on powerful computers and they're not thinking at all about these, where most of the surfing happens. Lakita?
So as far as the author controls, does it make a difference when you turn it to the left or either up and down?
Yeah, you know, that's a really good point. The general format that most people use their phones in is like this, right? Upright, like we see on the screen here. And yeah, when you flip it, it does make a little bit of a difference. And I think that the designers that are really astute will have like a point in their media queries or their responsive design where the upright view is one thing, and when you flip this way, it's a little bit different this way. Now, one really simple way to test for mobile, for as primitive as it is just to simply take your browser window and do what I've done here. And you can see my page is kind of mobile okay, but not really. Like my menu is horrible for mobile. So really what I should do is I should make what they call media queries that detect the width of the screen and then make my menu things bigger. And maybe like what I see in the PowerPoint, where instead of, you know, they're all in a blurb, they're all on separate lines. And big enough where I can get my finger on it. So I might make the font bigger, right? And put them on separate lines. Where here, I mean, that's a little bit more difficult. If I'm trying to get my finger on home, I might hit contact us by mistake. You also notice my graphic is horrible here, right? My logo. A lot of the rest of it really isn't too bad. I can still read the words. It doesn't look too bad, right? I might argue that I could make the margins smaller if I was on a phone. A lot of our browsers now, when you go into the inspect panel, so if you do right-click inspect, they also have this little icon here. You see this icon I'm hovering over? And it says toggle device toolbar. Both Firefox and Chrome and Edge all do this, by the way. You can click this thing and then notice what it does. It allows you to pick a brand of phone. Yeah. This is kind of an antiquated list, so I'm a little disappointed with Google Chrome. So they got a Galaxy S5, that's great, when I had my S5, I guess. But they do have like phone profiles built in here, and supposedly it shows you what it looks like on that device. Now, as far as I'm concerned, you know, I think that really it's almost like not necessary, since you can do this with your browser and it really simulates the same effect, right? And as you scroll, see, I didn't build any media queries into this. I just used basic HTML design, and it still kind of dynamically adjusts because of the way I built it. But not all websites do that really well. Let me give you an example. Here's a really interesting website, and I think the book points it out. And this is the Boston Globe. What's fascinating about this website is this, right? This is, you know, a big East Coast newspaper, a really reputable news source, by the way. And you can see I'm looking at their site full screen. They were one of the first websites on the internet to have responsive design, believe it or not, where I could take the same view and just narrow up my screen. And I think their site still really works well this way. So this is their full screen view, right? And keep in mind, I'm on a screen that's 1920 by 1080 pixels, okay, so full HD size. And watch what happens here as I narrow up the screen. You'll see that there's points, I haven't reached them yet, where it's going to flip. It's just going to pop to a different mode. I'm almost there. Okay, did you see the change? Right? We lost one of the columns. So this would be narrow desktop view. This is wide desktop view, 4 columns. Narrow desktop view, 3 columns. Keep going. We get about to the halfway point of the screen. It should pop into tablet view. So most tablets in the upright view have about 800 to 1,000 pixels across. So now we're in a 2-column view. Same content, right? Now watch as I keep going. At some point, they're going to say, we're at mobile view. Boom. And actually, some tablets might put it in this view too. And then that's the mode it stays in. Notice what also happened, though, when we went from, you know, the tablet view. Watch the menus at the top. Notice they got that little hamburger menu now, right? And that's kind of a standard. So, hey, we don't have all the room for the menu stuff, so why waste the space? people kind of know that this is a menu thing, so they click on it and they can go to all the stuff they want. Yeah, but they were one of the first sites to really do good responsive design. The mechanism that allows this to happen can be a few different things. The general mechanism that makes it work is this thing called media queries. It is kind of an advanced thing, so it's not something we really push on you a lot here, it's just kind of introduced. But when you get later on into your web development expertise, that's something you almost kind of need to know how to master. A lot of people get really frustrated with it, so what they end up doing is they use templates like Bootstrap or CSS Grid or Flexbox, which we're about to learn, to help automatically do all that stuff for you and still kind of keep your layout intact. Right?
That's what I kind of did too, but I just submitted what I had done so far.
Yeah, and you know, there's various techniques to this. One of the things that some people used to do is actually create separate websites for mobile. Right? So you'd hit a page, and then it would probe your screen width, and it was like, oh, looks like you're on a really narrow device. Here's the other version of the page. That was the old approach. The modern approach is to have your regular page be responsive. In other words, respond to the screen width and adjust dynamically. That's considered a best practice. Then you don't have to maintain two websites, right? And since most people surf mobile, a lot of people now are realizing that, and they design for mobile first and then worry about full screen. And that's a mindset shift, because all of us designers, what do? We work on full-size screens. It's not like you're typing HTML on your phone. You could, but not really, right? Right, so that's what he's trying to point out here, design for one web. There are a couple of websites here that they have from the WC3 that have recommendations for working with mobile, and you can explore that if you so choose. All right. So if you're working on mobile, what kind of approach should you use? They recommend a single column design. Multiple columns when you're tall and narrow does not make sense, right? So go to a single column design, and then you might use a layout like this. A header, a nav right below it, or the hamburger menu, right? Some people prefer that. Content, and maybe a footer if you think that that's appropriate. That's up to you. It says use heading elements, avoid using tables. We're going to learn about tables in the next chapter, I think. Provide labels for form controls. So if there's a username thing, maybe you should have a thing above it that says username, so people know what to type in. Avoid using pixel units in the style sheets. And that's kind of interesting, because I've been telling you to use it, but what they're really referring to is don't declare widths for things when they can be dynamic. So my Mr. Robot page, a lot of the stuff does not have a designation for width, and the reason it can adjust is because I don't. If you start setting a width to something, guess what? It gets locked into that, and when you move to mobile and you go narrow, that's like my logo up at the top, it's set for a certain width. That's the width it is because I told it to be. The smarter approach would be to have it adjust, and we'll learn that in a little bit. All right, avoid absolute positioning and hide content that's not essential for mobile use. So maybe on the regular website, you got all your sidebar ads. You don't got room for that on the mobile, right? You might just get rid of them altogether, or maybe put them somewhere else on the page, like at the bottom. You're just thinking. All right, so optimize navigation for mobile use. It says provide minimal navigation near the top of the page. So don't put too much up there. You don't want every link to your whole website, because then the user is not even going to get to any content on the screen. The modern approach is to use that little hamburger thing and have it expand. It does require some more advanced coding, though. So for right now, I would stick with really simple navigation at the top. 4 or 5 links, maybe. Be clever about how you lay them out. Avoid hyperlinks that open files in new windows or pop-up windows. Yeah, you know what? Pop-ups are annoying on the desktop. They're even more annoying on a phone. So where you might think it's a good idea to open in a new window or a new tab in the browser, it might not be as good of an idea on a phone. So I would, the author recommends don't do that. It says try to balance both the number of hyperlinks on a page and the number of levels needed to access information. So if you have an area of your website that's got like 20 sub-pages, you might want to come up with a scheme that makes it easier for a mobile user to get to that content. So it might require 2 clicks to get there rather than put it all on one page. Because if like you hit a menu and then it popped up a sub-menu and that list goes off the bottom of the page, kind of what good is it? It's not, right? So you might want to think of some other ways to do it. Set up your graphics so they look good on the phone, and look at the tips. Avoid displaying images that are wider than the screen. Yeah, like my Mr. Robot logo, right? That's a perfect example. Configure alternate small optimized background images. So you might actually, if you're probing for the screen width, decide that, you know what, I don't need that big fancy graphic in the background. Nobody's going to see it anyhow, right? Like I got that weird like sparkly networky thing in the background. That wouldn't look good at all on mobile. You can just get rid of it. What's the point? Okay. Some mobile browsers will downsize all images, so avoid using images that contain text. So in other words, if you're putting your logo at the top and you put words as an image in your logo, and then it's downsizing it, now your logo is like unreadable because you just made it tiny. So you probably want to keep the words out of the images if you can. Don't use large graphics. Specify the size of images, especially if they're going on a small screen, so you can control it. And then provide alternate text for graphics and other non-text elements. Why? Because if they have a bad data connection, at least it'll pop up the description of what's supposed to load. And those of you that have been in bad network connections with their phones, I mean, all it takes is like going inside of a building with a metal roof, right? Or being in the basement somewhere, and you can't get a signal and your stuff's not loading, and then all of a sudden you really appreciate the alt text on an image, which is considered required. So, all right. So you got to kind of come up with also a good use balance of like the size of your fonts, right? Generally speaking, when you put stuff on mobile, your fonts need to get bigger. Not smaller, bigger. You also want to have higher contrast and more space between items so that your fat finger can fit on the screen and click on it.
You literally said that?
I said that.
Okay, I'm like, it's all over
Yeah, yeah, that's not the author's words. Those are my words, you know. All right. Now, one thing that people will do often, right, is when we're working with mobile, they'll do this. They'll put in this meta tag called the Viewport Meta Tag, and it has a special purpose. Notice the 2 different images there, right? One shows, both of these are phone views of the site that he's working on, the Lighthouse Bistro or whatever. And the first one shows a regular web page trying to squeeze onto a mobile screen. And this is a mistake a lot of designers make. They don't have their pages adjust, and that's what you get. And then if you want to read it, you're pinching and zooming, right? And then hopefully you can see it, and you're not really kind of reading the whole thing. And what I do when I see a site like that, I'm like, whatever, I'm not going to even bother, kind of. That's my mindset. Lakita?
So is that actually optional for the site? So if you have to, or I know some sites are not to, doesn't give you an option to actually zoom in and out.
Yeah, that's a really good point, right? So some sites that you go to, you can't even zoom in on them, and that's because of the settings that they have in their CSS. Really what it is bad design. They're not thinking about mobile. And if you didn't know this, Google hates that. So when they find sites that are like that, they deprioritize them in search results automatically. Interesting, right? The next one down there, notice that one fits a little bit better, but the image is popping off the side, right? But what the Viewport Meta Tag does is this. It says the default action for most mobile devices is to zoom out and scale the web page so it all fits, right? That's the default action. Unless you've written it in a fashion where it will automatically adjust. So what's happening in the top right there is they set a width for things, probably like the content section, to a certain width. And it's like, well, they want that whole thing in there, I guess, so there it is. That's what the browser's doing. And it's not really very good for the content, obviously. All right, so this was, they say here, it was created as an Apple extension to configure display on mobile devices, and it configures the width and initial scale of the browser viewport. So in other words, what it does is when a person lands on the page, it resets your zoom You getting this? To 100%. Right? So if I look at something on my screen, and you know, the Mr. Robot page should be one of them, honestly. Now that I think about it, if I can get to a browser. Here we go. So here's my Mr. Robot page, and I zoom in, right? And I close that tab. And I go back to open it, and I'm pulling it back up from my history, yes. It's going to go back to the zoom. If I had a tag in there that said Viewport Meta Tag, you know, whatever scale, 1.0 back to 100%, it would go back to 100%. So here's the thinking on this. The thinking is, by putting that tag in, you're controlling the zoom factor on a page. The last thing you want is for somebody to hit your page all zoomed in and miss the point. You can control the entry point for the zoom level. So it's considered, if you're designing for mobile and you want it to look a certain way, especially if your page is responsive, you can preset that. So it's just considered good standard practice. Now ask me how often I use it. Right, so this is one of these practicality things. I figure if my page is designed right, I don't need to use it. However, some programs that you'll use will automatically throw it in, and I think it's okay. But you should understand what it does, and then you be the judge of whether or not you want it there. How do you become the judge of that? By just trying it on a bunch of different devices. And in some cases, maybe you do want people to stay zoomed in on your content. Maybe in some cases you don't. But that allows you to kind of hotwire that and preset it. All right, let's take a break right now. I think we've been talking for a while. Let's do a 5-minute break and come back and continue. All right, let's pick up now and talk about the CSS3 media queries, and this is one of the things we were just mentioning just a little while ago. The first thing I'm going to tell you from one web designer to another is media queries are kind of the deep end of the pool, okay? And let me just explain what that means. What you're doing with a media query is this. You're basically presetting some parameters that test to see how wide your screen is, and then based upon that width, deliver different CSS for certain items. That's kind of deep to think about. So when we were looking at that Boston Globe site, they had made some choices that as we were getting narrower, there's like certain standard points apparently where they think it's a, you know, wide desktop, narrow desktop, a tablet, and then a phone. And they have some points in width that they choose to do that. Probably the two most common media breakpoints are ones you actually see on the screen right now. Most smartphones do not have a display when like vertical wider than 480 pixels. So a real common breakpoint for mobile devices is at 480 pixels. So that's why they're saying here max device width 480 pixels. So notice how they do this. Two approaches. One is you can put a link in your document. So you're going to link to a different style sheet if only all, and see, I never use this terminology, I'll be real frank here. I usually just go right to this terminology and I say max device width 480 pixels, and then we serve up a different CSS file. What's considered more efficient though, because if you do this, you have to put it on every page. What's considered most efficient is that you remove that declaration from your link tag and instead put it directly inside your CSS, and you do that like this. You put in an @ sign.
Or then you put in that media thing.
Yep.
That did it for mine.
Yep. So then you add that @ media, that's the media query right there, @ media, and then you put in the terminology that goes with it. So some people will declare ranges, and there's examples of this online if you really want to dig deep on it, where they say minimum width this and maximum width that. But usually what most designers will do is this, is they'll use the max width option, because every time you get to that narrowing point, it will switch. And what will happen is, let's say with the second example at 768 pixels, when you cross that threshold for narrowness, whatever CSS styles are declared inside those two curly brackets will now override the other CSS styles on the page. So for example, with that Lighthouse Island Bistro graphic at the top, they might kick that in, a different size image, or different width for something, or a different font for something, or display none for something when it hits that point. And you put it inside there. And the thing to remember is that will only kick in when you cross that threshold. The two thresholds that they've declared there, 480 pixels, that's considered the threshold for mobile, and 768 is considered the threshold for tablet. And those are considered probably the two most important ones. And you know what? Those are very subjective. Those are kind of good starting points, but I always tell students you got to kind of play with it a little bit until you get it to behave just the right way. All right. When you get some really complicated designs, and I'm going to show you one, and I think it's always kind of cool to show you like student work. So I have some students that have been, and not that one, that have been working on project websites when they get to their final semester here. And here's one that my students built about a year or so ago. Looks pretty nice, right? Looks pretty, you know, kind of cool. And this organization here had this like logo. Yep, that's their official graphic. And this is sitting on top of WordPress, mind you, right? I'm not a huge fan, but you know what? It is what it is. But they had this issue when we were using these responsive views, the template that was built into WordPress wasn't handling that graphic really well. So you see like how it just jumped? So what the class did is they designed media queries so that every time I adjust and I get to certain points, usually right when the menu is about to touch it is when it changes. So you see how it keeps changing size, and then at one point they're like, boom, it just goes to a hamburger menu, and the graphic is gone. Now what's fascinating about this, you can do this on any website, folks. You can right-click, you can view source, I can go right to the style sheet, wherever the heck it is. I gotta find it. Yeah. You guys catching all these style sheets? Yeah, there's not just one. I think... Yeah, this is all done on WordPress. I think this is their primary style sheet. And then if I come in here and do a search for media, of course there's 48 of them. There we go. So here's one, for example. And I'm going to zoom in on it a little bit. Now some of this, frankly, was done automatically by WordPress. Some of it was already in there. So the theme that they were using had it built in. Okay? But when it came to adjusting that header logo, somewhere inside of here, they started hand tweaking it. So they actually had to go into the code files. But I'm just showing you what one looks like. And this is considered a better approach. So good templates will have entire ranges that they use to do this stuff. And you know what? It takes a little bit of patience and trial and error to get stuff to make it work right. I want to show you what this is so you're aware of it. But I caution you, this is the deep end of the pool, and you can get mired in this. So you don't worry about putting media queries on your project sites for Web 1. Web 2 and beyond, go for it. You know, you might actually be required to. Most professional designers don't sit here and hand tweak this stuff. That's why people use Bootstrap. That's why people use CSS Grid, and that's why people use Flexboxes, because they automatically adjust without having to do this. Okay? But there are times, especially when you're hand coding sites, that the only way to fix it is to come in and tweak the files manually. And that's where the media queries kick in. They're very powerful and they're really cool, and it's kind of neat when you see it in action. And this is something created by students just like you guys, where they made a decision at some point, all right, we're jumping out of that mode. And you know what, I'm zoomed in too, so that kind of confuses the waters a little bit. Really, it's supposed to be like this. So it's not supposed to jump to that mobile view quite so quick. But they made a decision at tablet view, roughly, is when the hamburger menu would kick in. And then all the content, since not all of it is really quite good yet, see how this stuff is like too close to the edge? So there's a few little issues. Overall, it's pretty good, but it's got a few issues. All right, so that's a work in progress, by the way. All right, let's go back to the PowerPoint. All right, here's a technique I'm actually going to go to the trouble of demonstrating because it's going to benefit me right now. Because you know my Mr. Robot logo doesn't look good when I make it mobile size, right? And notice what they're doing here is flexible images. So it says you edit your HTML and you remove the height and width attributes on your image. So let's go give that a try, shall we? All right, so I'm going to go to my code. Yeah, I've got Notepad++, I want to say WordPad++, Notepad++ up on the screen right now. And, well, actually, you know, I noticed that I actually don't have a size declared for it, do I? Okay, so I had made the recommendation early on that when you do put a height and a width in here, that you preset it to whatever the image automatically is to reserve the screen space. But what they're telling you here is if you want your image to be flexible, take them out. I'm already good, they're out. They're not even there. So the first step is okay. Then in your CSS, for whatever that image is, so you might apply it to all images or a specific one, so you might replace this with an ID or a class. You just want to put in max width 100% height auto. So let's go to the CSS file and make that happen. So I'm going to find that CSS file. Let's bring it into Notepad++. And I'm going to go back to my regular HTML code because I want to see here. Well, let's see, where does this sit? This is an image inside an anchor tag inside logo box. You guys catching the hierarchy here? So I can address that image specifically by saying this. So I'm just going to type the code in just to show you. So I could say, and I already forgot what it was, logo box. And let's just do it, well, hey, I got a logo box here already, right? All right, so why don't I just copy this, and then, because I don't want to do it to the logo box, I want to do it to the image inside the logo box. I can say logo box img, right, and put curly brackets around it. And then what was the command? Max width 100%, height auto. So what it's really looking at, this is what it's telling you, is that the biggest it's going to get is 100% of whatever the containing element is. Since the containing element is shrinking just fine, it will automatically scale, and then the height will be determined automatically based upon what the width is.
You just said 100%,
Yeah, Joe's catching on to something. Yes, you can, absolutely. So Joe's thing is, can't I just say with 100%? Yes. Right, but max width actually has a different implication. So let's save that. Let's make sure our HTML is saved. Let's go back to a browser where maybe that's showing. So let's do a refresh. No change at full view. All right, we're going to go to narrow view. Hey, it's not breaking anymore. Right? Really simple technique, folks. Works really well. Height is automatically determined. The width is self-adjusting. It can't be any bigger than 100% of what's allowed inside that element. And you know what? I got kind of lucked out. Whatever code I used, it looks pretty good. I didn't have to tweak it hardly at all. So these are the kind of like design choices you have to make it behave. Now, the beautiful thing is, because I'm using the same image on every page with the same inside the same tag structure, it's going to work on every page that way. So we can test that, and you should always test every page. Don't just go with one. I can get my cursor on there. There we go. So about, contact us, code examples, they all work, right? So that's a cool little trick. Now, whether you guys know it or not, HTML5's been around for a while. About 5 years now is an official standard, but it was in development for about 5 to 10 years before that, right? And yes, they are working on whatever the next version is going to be called, and here the author's calling it HTML 5.1. So this is an element that actually is not technically officially supported in the standard, but is going to be incorporated into the next one, but it already works. It's called the picture tag. And so what this shows you is that you can determine for a picture multiple different sizes depending on what your screen widths are. So notice the media tag inside there. So instead of going with a max width here, they're going with a minimum width. So they're saying if it's a minimum width of this, put in the big one. If it's a minimum width of this, put in the medium-sized one. If it's a minimum width of 320, put in the small one. So that way, regardless of what thing they're looking at, which direction it is, you're not taking that same image and just shrinking it down for a little screen. You're being more efficient, and you're actually giving them a smaller image for the smaller screen. You're doing your user a favor. This is considered the best modern approach, the one that we're seeing up on the screen here, because when you're looking at it on a phone, you're not forcing somebody to load that really big JPEG when they could load the little one. And notice that the fourth option inside the picture tag is what we call a fallback. So whatever the image, you have just an image for any scenario just in case the other ones don't read. So that would be the one that you originally designated, typically. Because here's the problem. Firefox, Chrome, and most of the modern browsers built on that code base do support this. Guess what browsers don't? Internet Explorer doesn't. I'm not sure how Edge, I think Edge does okay with it, but not great. So you have to kind of be careful with these newer techniques. Here's another new technique that some people are pushing. So same approach. So really what we're seeing here is kind of competing techniques. So when the standard does get finalized, one of these is probably going to go away. My guess is this one's the one that's going to go away. But what they're doing here is they're indicating the image and the screen width kind of all into the source set tag. I can see how that's more efficient, but I think the other one's easier to read. And my feeling is that the first one's going to be the one that wins out. We'll see. Both of them will work in the browser though, so that's kind of interesting to know. So don't load a huge image if you don't need to. This is one way to do it. All right. How do you figure out how stuff looks on a phone? Well, I showed you a couple of tools already. You know what the best way to figure it out? Use your phone. Load the stuff up on Apollo and look at it with your phone and see what it looks like. That's how you figure it out.
No, what if you don't have a phone?
Well, then you use one of these other options, Cordy. So there are actually pieces of software out there that emulate, but for me the easiest way is just use the desktop browser and make it narrow. I mean, right? I mean that's free. And then you have those emulation tools that are built in. I will tell you that there's ways to update those emulation libraries to get more modern phones in there, and I think Firefox has better ones than Chrome does, just so you know. Okay. All right, let's talk now about a couple of techniques for working around some of these issues. And the first of them is what we call the Flexbox layout. Now this is kind of interesting because this is actually a thing that was proposed by Microsoft, right, when HTML5 and CSS3 were coming out. And surprisingly, it actually took, and a lot of people are starting to use it to do layouts. Now what this provides for is that you can preset a layout, and then based upon your CSS settings, control how each part of a page responds and reacts. So for example, if I have a 3-column layout like that newspaper did, and I start narrowing down, I might start narrowing the columns too. Or I might leave one column alone and let another column narrow. And then maybe at some point, one of the columns disappears. And Flexbox allows you to kind of designate that, how you do it. So these are some of the properties that you use. I'm not going to demonstrate this. In fact, I have, I think, an assignment later on where you can convert like your personal page to a Flexbox layout if you want for extra credit. But the CSS that you use kind of looks like this. Now, I want you to notice something that's brand new in here that you guys have not seen yet. And that is, see that thing that says WebKit? Right. This is called a browser-specific media or CSS thing, and we're going to talk about that more. But that indicates that not all browsers treat this the same. Now, I don't know if you guys noticed, like here, they point us to a website called Can I Use? Let's go to that website. I'm just gonna, I know I could follow the link, but I'm gonna bring it up on purpose because I want you guys to be familiar with this. So, when you're working with some CSS stuff, and I used to use this site a lot, before HTML5 was a standard, I wanted to use a lot of the techniques within it, but it wasn't standardized yet, right? So you go to this website called Can I Use, and what it allows you to do is type in the name of any tag or CSS style and tell you which browsers support it. So I'm going to type in Flexbox, and I can tell you in the old days when I would type this in, like no browsers would really support it well, and you know what? I'm really shocked at what I'm seeing on the screen. What this is telling me is what? This is not well supported in the browsers. Everything's red. Firefox is okay with it, but everything else kind of has like these version issues, right? It says not supported, not supported. And look at all the browsers they have listed, right? So it says not supported, so this leads to why we have this included in the mix. When we say WebKit, that refers to Google Chrome. If you ever see one that says IE, what's that? Internet Explorer. MOZ will be Mozilla, which is Firefox. O for Opera. I forget all the other ones, but they're all, you know, sometimes by putting in a browser prefix, you can force it to work. But whenever you're doing that, I always tell people you're walking dangerous ground here. I can see from Can I Use that it's not widely supported.
This is just the gap property.
Ah.
So if this code now is support for the developer, this code now, and this could be updated.
Yeah, thank you. All right. So actually it is much more supported. Thank you for pointing it out. I appreciate that. I missed it. All right. The gap property. Ugh, okay. So I guess Flexbox looks like it is pretty well supported. But in the old days it was not. Microsoft, of course, supported it because they developed it, of course, and then everybody apparently followed suit. Thank you for pointing that out. But this is a great website because they do, you know, like if there are issues with it, people post stuff here, like version numbers, browsers, and how you fix it. See that? So it shows which browser supports it from what version above and above it does. So like older versions might not support it. Internet Explorer 6 through 9 doesn't support it. Even though Microsoft came up with it, it's kind of partial support. Notice with a prefix. You know, Safari, Chrome, Firefox, Edge, all are supporting it. All the mobile browsers support it too. So I guess this one seems like it's pretty safe to use now. All right, so this is how you would employ it. If you were doing a layout like this, you might want to take the main, the nav, and the aside in the middle and allow them to flex. And what you do is you put in these values that are relative to each other in size. So a 1 is half the size of a 2 and 1/7 the size of a 7. Get the thinking here? And then what you do is you put these in, and then it will automatically scale those so they automatically stay in that proportion as you resize. Takes a little bit of practice, and you know, honestly, I find there's better techniques for it. So my better technique is I set widths to percentages, and it kind of accomplishes the same thing. So if I said the nav is 10%, the main is 50%, and the aside is, you know, whatever, just as long as it doesn't exceed 100, then that will basically do the same thing. So this is a technique that kind of dumbs that down a little bit. There's another technique too, and this is called the CSS grid. I'm curious about that one. Let me go back to Can I Use and see if we type CSS grid. All right. That looks a little better than it used to as well. Looks like all the major browsers support it. Just a couple of things don't. Opera Mini, QQ browser, which I've never even heard of. Baidu browser, that's a Chinese one, by the way. But looks like all the major browsers pretty much support it now. But CSS Grid is a system that you can learn. So I'm not going to teach it here at all. I just want to let you know this. But it is a system very similar to Bootstrap that allows you to control a layout, kind of like with Flexbox, where things dynamically adjust by applying certain CSS classes to objects as you're building. So if you go in here and investigate this, W3 has a whole section on this if you want to learn it. Notice that the way that they do it. So it's trying to do the same thing as Flexbox, but they're using just a different approach. So they'll say grid row, grid column, and then they put in these like index values and stuff, and then that tells it how big to be relative to the other objects and adjusts. This is considered kind of like a universal replacement for Bootstrap, so instead of using a proprietary technology, they're kind of pushing you to use this open source technology. And I know some people are switching to it, but a lot of people have kind of stayed away until it gets more fully developed. Whether or not we'll ever be like formally teaching this, I don't really know, but you can certainly learn it on your own. It's not that difficult. And W3 is probably the best place to learn it because they're the ones pushing it. But what they're hoping to do is to make it part of the next CSS standard, CSS4, that it's just built in. Right now, you saw the browsers are supporting it, but it's kind of as an add-on. It's not officially part of the standard yet. Before CSS3 and HTML5 were standards, we were always going to can I use just to figure out if stuff is going to work on the screen or not. All right. They want to also remind you that there is a validator once again on W3 for CSS, so please don't refrain from using it. Check it out and see what it says about your stuff. And sometimes it'll give you lots of really good tips, usually on syntax, and be patient. Yeah, you know, here's the thing, folks. When you start working with layouts and getting things to look exactly the way you want to look, it takes a little bit of time. It's like you feel you can get to like the 90th percentile really fast, and then it's that last 10% that takes all the work. I'm going to argue it's the last 2% that takes all the work. But the difference between an amazing looking website and one that's is all the attention to detail. And that's true with most things in life. So depends on what you're trying to create. You don't have to create like, you know, a masterpiece for this class for a final project, but I don't know if you guys are catching this. I'm having you do a site design, and then you're starting to build up all around a theme, and then in the subsequent weeks you're going to be improving your site a couple times over and adding pages to it by assignment. So we'll learn about like tables today, and then one of your assignments is going to be to add a table to your site. And so as you go, if you keep up on those assignments, by the time you get to the final week, your final project is going to be kind of done. That's the whole aim of it, so you're earning points on it all along. All right, that wraps us for today for this chapter. We're not done for the day. You guys are like, yeah, go home. No, we got another chapter to cover, so we're going to take another break here. We'll do another 5 minutes, and then we're going to come back and switch to the next chapter where we're going to start doing some more coding. Okay, a lot of this stuff was conceptual. The next chapter is a lot of code. All right?